welcome to Game Connect Asia Pacific 2009. After what can be best described as a fairly tumultuous year for the Australian industry, this is the point where we start to rally again and plan for our continued growth and expansion of this fine industry. Now, before we move on to our keynote address, I'd like to mention a few housekeeping notes for all sessions of the conference. Would all delegates please ensure that their mobile phones are turned off during speakers' presentations? If you'd like to leave a message for anyone, any delegates, then you can leave them on the notice board, which is located next to the registration desk. Messages cannot be delivered personally, so please check this board at regular intervals if you're expecting a message. Delegates are required to wear their name badges at all times. You will not be allowed entry in conference sessions or provided access to catering breaks unless you are wearing your name badge. I would also like to take this opportunity to recognise the generous support of our sponsors: Epic Games, Autodesk, the State Government of Victoria, Firement, Big Ant Studios, Tantalus, Big World, the Academy of Interactive Entertainment, Image Metrics, Havoc, Blue Tongue, THQ Studio Australia, Sony and Microsoft. Without their generous support, this conference simply would not be possible. So a round of applause, please. Without further ado, I'd like to bring to the microphone the Chief Executive Officer of Tantalus Interactive and the President of the Games Developers Association of Australia, Mr. Tom Crago.
Welcome everybody. It's a thrill to be able to look out to the audience and see so many friends and so many colleagues. And I want to thank you all sincerely for coming to GCAP, for supporting this event, for making it possible. Simon has alluded, it has been a challenging year for the Australian game development community. We've lost a couple of studios. We've seen some other studios who've been forced as a result of tough economic times to downsize. And yet here we are, not looking at the past, but thinking about the opportunities for the future and what 2010 can hold for us as a group, as an industry. And it's really important for me that this conference is a time in which we all come together as studios and as individuals and think about how we can help and support one another to ensure that next year and beyond we realise the great potential that we have in all of us here and all of the game development studios. Australia. I genuinely believe in this industry, in our capacity to rebound. I think this conference marks the start of that turnaround. I want to echo Simon's sentiments in thanking our sponsors. We have had fantastic support this year from a number of Australian studios, from the Victorian Government, from Autodesk, from Epic, from many others without whom, for sure, we wouldn't be able to put on this event. There are many highlights peppered throughout the program this year. Shortly we'll hear from Tim Stellmach from Vicarious Visions, the opening keynote of the conference. Tim's a guy I've admired for a long time. I was thrilled when he accepted our invitation to come here and speak. Vicarious Visions, a terrific company, certainly a company at Tantalus that we've looked upon and admired from afar. Tomorrow morning, we're proud to have David Jaffe here via video link. We've got Hex and Bajo from Good Game who will be interviewing David tomorrow, and everybody will have a chance to ask him some questions. The Epic Welcome Party tonight, straight after Tim's keynote, and of course our awards show tomorrow. I hope that all of you will join with me in making the most of this event, treating it as an opportunity not just to learn and share ideas, but also to network and support one another as we consider our play for 2010 and beyond. Thank you, and it's my pleasure to declare Game Connect Asia Pacific 2009 open.
Thanks, Tom. It now gives me great pleasure to introduce our keynote speaker for this opening session. Tim Stellmach is a veteran of almost 20 years in the games industry, having worked as principal designer on acclaimed titles such as Thief and System Shock. He is now the design director at Vicarious Visions, the developer of the new RPG hit Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2. Would you give him a round of applause, please, Mr. Tim Stellmach?
Check the slideshow for me. My apologies. Over here? Okay. My mistake. I'm afraid the previous session did not give a great deal of time to orient before I started here, though I take that as a sign of the success of that session. It seemed like the discussion was very lively, so that's a good thing. But because of that, I do have to ask you to bear with me for a few moments. All right, we're good. All right, there we go. All right. Hello. I'd like to thank the conference organizers for inviting me to speak to you today. This is my first time in Australia, and I have to say I'm enjoying it tremendously, though I do find myself unaccountably self-conscious about my accent. In addition, I think you'll find that the talk itself includes references to baseball, Captain America, and a variety of idiomatic uses of English that may or may not be Australian. But let's move on. I'd also like to give credit to Dan Tangway, who was our creative lead on Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2. Without his invaluable assistance, I would have been incapable of developing this talk by myself. That's the people I just met. Alright, so having thanked those people, before we get started in earnest, I hope you'll let me indulge myself a little further. What you see here is a simple baseball statistics game. You translate the performance statistics of the batsman that you see on the right onto a sort of essentially a pie graph, turn that into a card that goes on this spinner. Why am I talking about this? Well, this is a game that my father and his brothers used to use to pass the time when they were growing up on a farm in the American upper Midwest. It's also the first game that I can remember personally having learned to craft for myself. My father, who taught me about baseball statistics using this game, was an accountant. I would grow up to be a game developer. As it happens, this week was also my father's 70th birthday, so happy birthday to Dad. All right, back to the topic at hand. Our talk today is sort of a focused post-mortem of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 2. You're probably all familiar with the usual post-mortem format, where you work for a couple of years on a game and then you talk about it for an hour. It seems like it doesn't really get into the nitty-gritty of the problems that you faced on the game, however. So I'm going to try something a little different. We're going to spend our hour talking about just one scene in this game and the choices that went into it and that followed from it. I have no idea if this is going to work. We'll see. All right. So the scene that we're going to be talking about is the one where the player actually has to choose a side in the central conflict of the game. The choice has a lot of game mechanical consequences. It will, among other things, determine what set of missions the player goes on for about the middle third of the game. Now, this sort of branching story is hardly unheard of, but it's not common either, and there's a good reason for that. It's a lot of work, and it relies on content that some of your players may not see. And in addition, however, to the game mechanical